Number 4. This happened during a Boy Scout campout when I was 15. My friend, who was supposed to share the tent with me, called out from the trip at the last minute, so that meant I had to pitch the tent and sleep in it alone. The sun was going down, and after a long day of hiking, we got back to camp to set up our tents. It was already dark at that point, and I was still trying to set it up. It wasn't as easy doing it yourself. Someone came over and finally helped me, and then we ate dinner. After the cliched telling of scary stories around the campfire, we all went to sleep. I guess I was a little happy that I had my own tent at that point, since I had more room. I fell asleep quickly, but woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of somebody stomping around my tent. I immediately assumed it was another scout going to take a leak or something. You may be thinking that all our attempts were pitched right next to each other, but our scoutmasters actually had us pitch our tents far apart, so I was pretty far from my closest scout mates. His stomping around the tent seemed to just be going around in the circle, so at that point I was sure somebody was messing with me. I asked who it was, and in response to that, they stomped off into the woods. I almost found myself going out and following them, but I figured it wasn't worth it and just tried to fall back asleep, but after that it was hard to. Sure enough, the stomping came back and started circling the tent again. I was pissed off now, so I got up and unzipped the door to the tent. I was expecting to see another scout, but when I confronted the person making the noise, instead I saw a grown man, probably 6'5", in his mid-30s. My heart was racing, and I couldn't even gather up the courage to scream. The man gave me a creepy smile and then brought his finger to his lips, signaling for me to be quiet. I did a quick 180 and sprinted to my scoutmaster's tent, screaming like a baby. He ran out before I even reached the tent, and I told him about the man I saw. He and the other scoutmaster ran over to my tent with one of the hunting rifles, but they didn't find the man. They did, however, pick up on the tracks. The man left walking around the tent. We were all told to bring our tents closer together, like literally right on top of each other. The trip was cut short the next day, and we all went home. I have never gone camping since, and I never will again. That sounds like an absolutely terrifying experience. You and your friends went out for what was supposed to be a fun, carefree camping trip by the Willamette River, only for things to take a sinister turn in the middle of the night. The thought of hearing someone laughing in the woods, someone who clearly wasn't part of your group and whose laughter sounded unnaturally off, must have been deeply unsettling, especially when it kept getting closer and closer to your campsite. The fact that the laughter seemed to move without any accompanying footsteps is eerie enough, but then seeing a hand press against the fabric of your tent in the moonlight, especially after all that laughing, would have been the final straw. The pure terror of not knowing who or what was out there, combined with the fear of being so isolated, would make anyone want to flee as fast as possible. Running through the woods in the dark, not knowing if you were being followed or if whatever it was might catch up to you, must have been incredibly stressful. Even though driving after drinking is never a good idea in that moment, it's easy to understand why you felt it was the only way to escape whatever was out there. That kind of experience would leave anyone shaken to the core, and it's no surprise that it stands out as the most horrific moment of your life. After college, I went backpacking in the Canadian wilderness by myself for a few weeks. To put this in perspective, I was in the middle of nowhere. The nearest town was a 3-hour bus ride away, and during the entire 7 days, I only saw one other person from a distance. He was in a canoe. I brought a few disposable cameras with me since this was before digital cameras were widespread, and I took a lot of pictures. When I got home, I had the photos developed and took a look at them. They were mostly standard nature shots until I got about halfway through my first camera. That's when I saw 2 pictures of me asleep in my tent, in my sleeping bag. I freaked out when I saw them and had a complete breakdown. To this day, I have no idea how those pictures were taken. I haven't been camping since, and I sleep with my door open and my curtains shut. I still get the paranoid feeling that whoever took those pictures is somehow still watching me. My boyfriend and I decided to go out to the gorge for some quality time camping. We had always gone with several other people, but this was the first time it was just the two of us. When we got out of our car to prep our gear for the mile hike back to the camping spot, two sketchy-looking dudes came out of the trailhead, eyed us, and went back to their old-school Volkswagen camper van. I had a weird feeling but shrugged it off and proceeded back to our camping spot. I had camped in this area a handful of times before, so I knew it pretty well. Once we got back there, I checked out a few different camping spots to find the ideal one for us. I noticed what looked like someone camping further up the hill, so I picked a spot a little further down where we'd likely be out of sight, but not out of earshot, because I could hear the guy yelling with someone else back over on the trail. It was starting to get dark by the time we set everything up, so I figured I'd start looking for firewood. Suddenly, this guy appears out of nowhere and asks if we'd like any help or if we wanted to buy a bundle of firewood for $10. I laughed because, well, we were in the woods, surrounded by wood that I could pick up off the ground for free. He then said I wouldn't find much because they'd already cleared it out over the past few weeks. Few weeks? I asked him how long he'd been camping up there, and he said almost a month. I already had the creeps about him, and he claimed he was up there by himself. When I asked him why I heard him yelling with someone earlier, and why he had referred to more people when talking about the wood, he stammered and was like, yeah, there are some dudes I know camping over there, but up on the other side of the river. Then he proceeds to tell us that he's been lonely since he arrived, that he's from Pennsylvania, took a bus to Lexington, and has been living in the woods behind where I currently work. I knew exactly where he was talking about because I see some homeless people, immigrants, and drug addicts coming in and out of those woods every day. So basically, he was a homeless man who somehow got a ride out to the gorge and decided to live there instead. He'd been living on snakes, bugs, and selling firewood for money, but he said we were the first people he'd seen in a few weeks. His stories were all over the place, and I knew he was lying about a lot of what he told us. He wasn't alone, even if he claimed to be. He even took us to his camp, where there were tons of stuff for several guys, not just one. He said he liked camping up top where he could see everything and everyone. And then he showed us our campsite. He had a straight shot view. By now, it was dark, and he helped us get a fire going. I was trying to politely get him on his way back up the hill so I could have a minute to process all this. When he finally left, I started whispering to my boyfriend that there was no way in hell I could sleep with that sketchy, homeless creep right up the hill. We didn't have a gun, knife, or even a dog to protect ourselves if we needed to. My boyfriend somehow convinced me to stay a little longer, so we planned to stay the night. But all throughout the night, we heard twigs and branches snapping around our tarp, as if somebody was watching us. I knew it was that man. He was standing out there, watching us. I told my boyfriend, let's quietly get our stuff together and get the hell out of here, which we did. We left our new tarp set up because it would make too much noise, and he'd know we were leaving. As soon as I stood up with my pack, ready to get out of there, he yelled, "Leaving so soon?" We proceeded to get away as quickly as possible. The most disturbing thing was that as we were getting away, the man yelled for us to come back. That only made us go even faster. In my mind, we were either going to get robbed, raped, killed, or something because he was not alone. His stories didn't add up, and his background of where he came from made me believe he was running from something and trying to hide by living off the grid. I called the Rangers the next morning and told them about him. Luckily, all he got from us was a set of new tarps.